Good afternoon. I am Pete, also known as Risk for Rewards. We're over on Twitter, known as @Risk for Rewards. Currently got around 20,500, probably a few more followers over on Twitter, and got about just under 1,800 here YouTube subscribers. Um, if you haven't already subscribed, if you click the link below here on YouTube, just means that when my content goes live, you get it straight away, whether it's be it on your phone or on your TV. You're not waiting around because obviously often I do not tweet to say I've put a video live. I just do it when I can. So if there's racing all day, then obviously if there's early prices for anything, you'll miss it. And I am going to try and get as many videos out as possible. If you're following for the written content, obviously YouTube, I've got the blog, and I try to get as many big selections out for the big races. Things like obviously the derbies, the Grand Nationals, etc., etc. Today we're going to discuss purely Royal Ascot review. I know most people won't even want to watch this video after the week that was, but at the end of the day, there's a reason all those horses lost, and obviously all those horses losing, chances are there's a strong chance that many of them are going to bounce back next time out. So you can either obviously sulk and not look at any of it, and then next time when they bounce back and they win, you're like, oh well, they got beat at Ascot, so they can't win again. Some of them would have had a reason, some of them you just can't tell whatsoever because the form book got thrown out the window. So I'm going to do this in days, Tuesday all the way through to Saturday. I'm not going to. I'm going to cut all the magical stuff. I'm not going to sit here and tell you about how magical like the Frankie Dettorian stuff, because the majority of you will have watched it. You will have seen everything, and most people, if you're sat here watching this, you're not interested in that sort of thing. You're here because you're either passionate about racing, or you're here because you're looking for the next winners in the next few weeks. Differences as well between flat and the jumps is we could be waiting months, like as in we could have seen all these horses, and then we might be waiting 3 months to get the next run, so you may not have interest. Some of these flat runners will be out in 2-3 weeks, some might even be out this weekend. They really don't waste any time, especially if a horse is flopped or if it's in a big handicap. They can often get turned out within 7 days, so that's why it's important to try and get these reviews out as quick as possible, which is why I've done it today. So without any further ado, we're going to get straight into it. So Tuesday, straight into the shocks, and obviously the first shock of the Ascot Festival was the Queen Anne Stakes. So I say it was a shock. This one was one of those where it was a shock, but I'd actually heard quite a few good uh, high class judges put Triple Time up as an outsider for this race. I think there was a combination of a couple of different things to why they'd put them up. Obviously, it had been off for 262 days, so it's hard to be confident in anything, but it was going to be a big price. Me personally, I saw the judges, I read a few columns of things people put up at 33 to 1, but when I was looking at it, it was then below 20 to 1. I didn't even look at it on the day to see that it drifted back out to, it was out at 33 to 1 again. Obviously, you can make a case. You look at some of the form, but the form's still like the levels and the RPRs and the official ratings are still much lower than what you'd expect from a Queen Anne winner coming into this race. I think a lot of people took interest in the fact that going into the lock-in, there was a lot of money for Triple Time before getting pulled out, and obviously, but on this day there wasn't a lot of money. But that's probably because there's so much money for the likes of Frankie Dettori runners. I think a lot of people thought Modern Games had everything in his favour. And to me, I thought that myself, obviously, with my two selections. Triple Time, if someone had said, "Oh, do you want to bet on it halfway?" you would have said he's never going to stay home. It was it's hard to work out whether he just travels in that nature, because the way the connections speak after the race, they say that's just him. He's a very exuberant racer. He's not exerting all his energy, but he looked very keen throughout. And obviously, when he hit the front early. And I think that ride from the front was perfect in hindering Innsbruck's chance. Frankie, again, she missed the kick. You go back and you watch that race again, and she's slow out the gates. She's losing like a good couple of lengths, and she's just not in a rhythm. Like all the rest are bouncing out, and they get. And I know it's only a couple of lengths, and it's a start, but you just can't afford to do that in a mile sort of race. Even in a 12 furlong race, it's not so much even just the fact that you're giving up the lengths at the start. It's you're giving up where your position is in the race. So, and she was always covered up in a fairly nice position. But when Frankie angled her out, he perhaps angled her out a slight bit too soon. But she came there with her run. She had every chance. She just couldn't pass the winner. Light Infantry's obviously come on and ran a stormer. I put him up in the Lockinge, and he's been a no-show 2 runs so far. I think the aim with him is further down the line international targets. So they're obviously bringing him along and hoping he picks up some money on the way. Modern Games was disappointing, but that just sums up Charlie Appleby's week, to be honest. In fact, I'll find you give me 2 seconds. For those who haven't already seen what I put up today, Charlie Appleby's week, and this isn't me knocking trainers, this is just purely stating facts. He only had 18 runners, which for him is quite a small amount of runners. They're running at 50% run to form. For those that don't understand that, that means that obviously if you're run into a rating of, say, you're rated 110, you'd expect for your RPRs to match your ratings. And the stats say that he's running to around a 50%. His horses ran to around 50% run to form last week, and he was obviously 0 for 18. They just all had different reasons. Some didn't finish their races, some just didn't spark, some, yeah, there were so many different reasons. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't write Modern Games off, but he did have everything in his favour that day. He came in off a career best. He was the best in the Lockinge. He had fast ground. He had a straight mile. There was very little not to like about his chance, and to only manage fourth. And it wasn't so much losing to Interborough in triple time, but to be behind light infantry, who he'd make very light work of last time out. It's just not a good run. Be interesting to see. Obviously, it sounds like today both Innsbruck and Triple Time are both going to head towards the Jack Lamawa. It hasn't been confirmed for Innsbruck 100%, but that's what they said post race. She obviously has an entry in the Falmouth as well, but I think she got turned over at 1-7 at Newmarket last year, so it might well be straight to the Jack Lamawa for her. And obviously, she doesn't mind a break, but it's hard to. As much as if you said, okay, Innsbruck could race it, and maybe she was, she probably, well, she might have been the best horse on the day, but if she's going to keep missing the lengths, like she didn't do that in the Jack Lamar, she was quick away. But if she keeps missing lengths, that's the last two times she's done that. They were both at Ascot, so maybe it's the track, but it's just always going to be a hindrance. And if you're going there and you're taking a short price, not even a short price like 6-4, but even you're taking 4-1 or less against other horses like Triple Time, you know he's going to get a few free lengths at the start. So it's hard to have your faith in her, in my opinion. So it's a tough one. The mining division is always, unless you've got a superstar like a Baid or a Palace Pier, it's always a very tough division. It's a bit like the sprints; they often beat each other. And obviously, as we'll find out later, you've got the up and comers coming into it from the younger divisions like Paddington. So Coventry Stakes, keep this short. Obviously, River Tiber, the word was out. The Coolmore, one of the Coolmore naps of the week. The talk was about it. I just think Aidan O'Brien's really perfected his way of honing these 2-year-olds for these races now. I think he was getting caught out in the past where they were going there, either they may have had once or twice raced, but they were going there very light on experience, as in they hadn't had a battle, or they'd won on the bridle, or they just went there with 2-1s. Whereas by obviously putting them in, and like by dropping him back into 5 furlongs and him having to work to get past the tourist, I really do think that was not that in particular, but those sort of campaigns are more the making of him, because he didn't, the first time out he won by 10 lengths. If he'd gone and done another one of those and won 10 lengths, what's he learned? Very little. But he really had to dig deep, and once he did, he found more and more, and I think that just puts you in good stead for these sort of races. One take that I did have from Ascot this week, is myself included, is that over the years I've made a fair bit of money and I've placed many bets on these 2-year-old races, and it was only highlighted to me last week because of obviously the sheer catastrophe that went on throughout the week. Was like, what are we doing as punters betting on these 2-year-old races regardless? Like, I mean, okay, yeah, you might have one at like, okay, like say an elite status I had at like 33-1. That's fair enough if you've got a bit of like a hunch that they'll definitely go to the Norfolk and that sort of direction. But like, obviously, if you're backing River Tiber at 6-4 and gets the job done, pat on the back, great. But in reality, if you're taking horses at, I don't know, even 5, 6, 7, 8-1, like by the time we came to the end of the week, I was looking at these races, like especially the Albany on the Friday, and I think it might have been, say, 18 runners or something, and there was about 6 of them were under 10-1. And I thought, the bookies cannot physically lose unless you're unlucky and someone walks up to your pitch and says, I want 10 grand on number 5, and that's the one that drops. Like, we are literally judging on 1 or 2 runs. It's like you having the Supreme Novice like in November, and people putting proper bets on it, like half decent bets, like, oh, I'll have 2 points on this or 3 points on this. Like, don't get me wrong, yeah, of course you want to have a bet, especially if you're there for the day, have a bit of fun or whatever. But like, these should be such small bets, and that's one thing that I learned from last week, was the fact that it doesn't matter how, like, we'll go into it later on, but it's, yeah, it's just even if you got River Tiber at 6-4, 15-8 or whatever, great price, good winner, goes on from here, and obviously clearly a very good horse, and he likes to run his best in the Coventry. I'm not going to go through the run of all the 2-year-olds, because to begin with, they'll all beat each other until the form line's set out. Onto the King's Stand, Bradsell. Very difficult to see coming, in my opinion. I mean, last seen absolutely whomped behind Little Big Bear, and I get it, yeah, dropped back a furlong and was travelling well throughout the race when Little Big Bear went away. But if that was over 5 furlongs or 6 furlongs last time out, I can't see a way where Little Big Bear wasn't beating Bradsell. But this is just phenomenal training position, training performance to obviously only he would have known that this was the plan, that they were going to run in this sort of orientation. And you listen to connections afterwards, and I've been reading the analysis today and rewatching the racing, and it sounds like they learned on that start against Little Big Bear that 5 furlongs was going to be the trip. That's what they wanted. And obviously they rolled the dice, supplementing into the King's Stand is a flipping. And I know you get masses of weight. Like, what weight did you have? I say masses of weight. It's only £6 off the horses, but it at the same time, it's just, yeah, it was just such a very, very good performance. I mean, that is a superb ride from Holly Doyle as well, because she's got to the front. Highfield Princess, in my opinion, if Holly Doyle was, say, over on the rail on the other side, I think Highfield Princess wins that race, or at least goes incredibly close to winning that race. But she's positioned her horse in a way that she's literally perfected everything in every manner in that final furlong, because they've got in a bit of a ding dong. She's pulled in front. She's got a horse far enough in front that she knows that if she pulls across to almost half close the door, it's intimidated the horse coming along. So Highfield Princess has intimidated that horse enough that he can't continue in a straight line. But she's also switched her whip to the other hand as if to say, well, I'm trying to get him to go the other way. Everything about that was just perfection from Holly Doyle. And it was funny because I thought at the start of the week, I thought it's amazing how Holly Doyle really sprung onto the scene last year, and like, well, obviously the last few years, but in particular she had quite a big year. And everyone was talking about Marquand being like not secondary to her, but a little bit quieter. But she bounced back with a vengeance this week, and just shown the quality of what she is. Highfield Princess, brilliant horse, knocking horse, but it just proves exactly what I was saying at the start, is how hard it is to win 3 Group 1s in a row, which she did last year. Obviously she's come here, this is her third, well, obviously this was her second sprint, and she's now faced defeat twice in a row. Obviously, first time back, they said she would have needed it, but she had very little excuse. Obviously under a good ride from Bradsell, but at the same time, you're looking behind and you're like, it's hard to predict. Twilight Calls, Admiral as he was again, finishing fourth, but I do think there's much for muchness, and the rest will probably beat each other. But I think Highfield Princess will always set the standard wherever she goes this year. So on to the St James's Palace Stakes. Me personally, I can hold my hands up and say that obviously it looks silly now. I backed more Stabshire anti-post 10-1, went off about 14-1 drift when the rain came. Obviously you have to remember as well, this went off, there was soft in the title, which is a bit silly really for Royal Ascot this time of year, but it is what it is. And the likes of a Moss Stabshire, the Cicero's Gift was like 5-2 at one stage in the anti-post market, and ended up going off 12-1. That just shows you the difference. There's a lot of money, like hard money down in different angles. Some was right, some was wrong, but they pushed a lot of horses out and they were well beaten. At the end of the day, it was simple when you look at it after. Who's the best 2 horses? The 2,000 guineas winners. Who comes first or second? The 2,000 guineas winners. Bit silly afterwards when you look at it really, and this was one of those where you should have had it if you'd picked the right one. Paddington was just hard to get your head round because obviously he was on the right side of a pace bias. And obviously he'd come from a handicap route. It wasn't like he'd come in a classy background. Chaldine was unbeaten. That English 2,000 guineas form is absolutely dreadful now. There's no, like, the 2 best horses in it were clearly the 2 at the back who ran no race, which was Little Big Bear and August Rodin. So yeah, what you do with that. Obviously Chaldine's not just suddenly, or Caldine, however you want to call him, it's not suddenly become a bad horse. It's just that Paddington was very impressive. Was he 2-1 for the Sussex Stakes impressive? Not for me, no, I don't think he was, but I do think he was impressive on the day and one of the better winners of the week. Onto the Ascot Stakes. This was frustrating, and I think this bad ride led to one good ride, and that was obviously Bring on the Night. Backed in from 5-2 into 13-8. Finished behind Coltrane a length and a half. Had about £19. Coltrane's gone up, only carrying £3. Chance was obvious, but regardless of however the horse was going to run, it just got no run. I mean, kept in a pocket, kept in the part. You were never going to get that run. It was a really surprise. That was the one knock I could have of Ryan Moore this week, was the fact you were never going to get that sort of open door in a field of 19 runners where they all know that you're the one to beat. So he never got a run, and obviously the horse petered out anyway, so he may not have been up to it anyway. Obviously a horse with no name was in foal at the time, and so she's off to the stables anyway, but good for Nicky Henderson. I stood here and said Henderson's ran many fancy runners in here and not got the result, but sums up Royal Ascot this week really, like you couldn't have explained it. Law of the Sea I had, ran very well. I always think the Ascot Stakes, you want to take the Chester form. So the Chester form of the two handicaps there translate well. And Law of the Sea ran a good race. But a horse with no name, Buick, took the absolute daredevil ride and paid off. Where does that translate going forwards? Well, it doesn't really, because you probably won't see it much. Wolferton Stakes, Buckaroo was the horse that obviously I thought would take. Sevens into 3-1. Group horse dropping into a handicap. Ran like that. The draw beat him to start with, but at the same time he wasn't going to beat Royal Champion. Royal Champion was one of those Roger Varian horses. You always see those yellow colours pop up in big handicaps. Well, this was a listed race. Big races at the Ascot, they just come in with like a huge performance. And that's exactly what he did. He was. I know obviously you could say many might have been unlucky, but you look through his form and like at Chester, 5 lengths beaten by Point Lonsdale, sent off 22-1. Before that, 50-1, beaten 120 lengths by Bay Bridge. So I mean, and before that his form was beating Yukon Glen round Ayr. So I mean his official rating was 111. So I mean, and if I go to, I'll just click on that quickly. Apologies. Past winners, and you're looking at RPRs of. He fits in with the RPRs of all the numbers, but it's just the fact that the form going into a race is just almost not impossible to. I think the biggest thing that a lot of people got frustrated with is the fact that it's very hard to know or even guess the winners because it was the level of form that you were looking at a form book with all the level of form for what study you've got in front of you. But there's a lot of horses that came in off big breaks or would come and run an awful run and then come here and they'd improve like 20-30 pounds from what you'd already shown. And I think two things that plays into. One is the fact on the flat, it's very difficult to know how a trainer will they have them 120% or will they have them at 80%. Obviously, you'd expect they'd have 120%, but as we saw this week, some horses they don't have 120% despite the absence and it being Royal Ascot. But some get away with it anyway. And then the other side of the thing is we've had 6 weeks of really soft, rubbish ground, and then obviously we've suddenly got good to soft, and then the rest of the week was good to firm or good ground. So some improved for that as well, and it's just a combination of different things. So it's hard, not really much you'd want to take out of that, and then obviously Vauban, wowzers. I mean, Vauban, every National Hunt fan was absolutely loving this. Sounds like they may roll the dice with the E-ball, but Melbourne Cup's obviously going to be the main long-term aim. I think, I mean, Rich Ritchie was absolutely over the moon, and if you haven't watched it, at the races did a really good video of him watching his own horse or not watching the race, and it just shows the passion and stuff. I know everyone knocks him, yeah, he's obviously probably a millionaire or whatever, but it just shows how passionate he is about the game still, and that's what's important. And it was brilliant to watch, and it's definitely one of the highlights of the week. And Vauban was just electric. When he started getting pushed along, people were like, "Oh, here we go!" But he got pushed along, and he just found and found and found, and he was like a proper National Hunt performance. The only downside was obviously every man and his dog saw that, and Lord knows what they're going to do handicap wise and what they'll get. Because obviously at the end of the day, if you're trying to get into a Melbourne Cup, you want to get in on a good weight. You don't want to be given 4 stone by the handicapper and then getting in, and then. But who knows what weight would stop him at the moment? But obviously we'll find out tomorrow what the handicapper thought of that. So just in summary, the Queen Anne Stakes Triple Time is going to be very interesting going forward. See how he gets on. See if he improves with racing and obviously settling. Inspiral, I want to see her away, but unless she's a bigger price, I wouldn't want to be taking a short price about her. That's twice she's missed a kick now, and she's shown a few quirks, and we've seen her get beaten at short odds in herself. Coventry Stakes, River Tiber, very impressive. Will always be impressive going forwards. No doubt he's going to be the one to beat in some of the big races. Wouldn't surprise me if he starts getting stepped up in trip towards the end of the season. Bradsell obviously sets a stand in the 5 furlongs, but I don't think that's a very high standard whatsoever. Like you look at the King's Stands, obviously Bradsell beat Highfield Princess, but you go across to like the likes of obviously we've got races coming up, and I think there's some better horses or as good horses to come. Champion Stakes, I was very impressed with Paddington. Caldine, I think the jury's not out, but I just think he's still a good horse. He's just not as good as others. And then from that, obviously Vauban, it'd be interesting to see what they do. So anyway, that's Tuesday. Now we go on to a Wednesday for anyone who's obviously looking to skip into different days. I'm going to try and keep this a bit shorter. Wednesday, Queen Mary. So I echo everything that I just repeated about the 2-year-old races. These should be your smallest bets of the week. There's no question about it. I get it, handicaps, 30 runner handicaps, they should be small bets. But at the same time, at least you've got a load of form to go on. Whereas these, you're looking at maybe 1 win or 2 wins. And like obviously in this case for the Queen Mary, you're looking at, what was it? 1/3 and 1 win. And obviously they were in America. How can you just can't cross relate that. So you're looking like in a down alley. Relief Rally, so unlucky. But the problem is obviously Relief Rally and then 2 lengths back to Beautiful Diamond. But Beautiful Diamond was only on her second start of her campaign, whereas Relief Valley, that was her third start. So if they met again, will Beautiful Diamond improve past her? Will Beautiful Diamond become a better horse going around a bend compared to Relief Valley? This is the problem with the 2-year-olds. Until you get in reality, like a lot of people are saying, oh, I hate the flat and all this. As I said last week, this is like October, November time with the jumps. They're building the form book. In 3 or 4 runs' time, you'll get Relief Rally will have finished twice in front of Beautiful Diamond, and she will have got really good stable form. Those two will meet, and Relief Rally will be like, say, a 6-4 shot in a half decent field or a 2-1 shot, and you'll be like, well, I already know that she's got the beating of her, and that's when obviously you could start thinking about betting. Kensington Palace Filly Stakes, that was just an absolute nightmare of a race. Like I would say, you look through it, it's a handicap, so obviously these are all well handicapped horses. For anyone who doesn't follow how the handicaps work, generally the BHA will release. Is it BHA? The handicap will release tomorrow. The numbers will come out. So if you go on Racing Post or whatever, go to the ratings of a horse, and they'll have a new number by like say lunchtime or whatever. You can actually, obviously, there is ways of looking at it, but I don't know how to go into like their website, and I don't think that's open to the general public. But all the numbers will change next to. So say Villanova Queen for winning this, she might go up £10. But in reality, the horses to take out of it, and I went through this with my notebook earlier, and Don't Tell Claire, who came second, Adelaise and Yawan there. So both the Joseph O'Briens that were sent off 5-1 and 7-1, both got no run. They clipped heels at one stage, they had no run in the race, they ended up going wide. There's not much that could have gone any worse for them, and they only finished like a length and a quarter behind the winner. And the same applies to Don't Tell Claire. I think just hit the front too early, and Villanova Queen just snatched the victory. So me personally, I'd have the second, fourth, and fifth all in there. And I'm not saying that Tarab in fourth isn't well handicapped as well, because obviously the horse is so unexposed. But it's just they stood out like an absolute sore thumb to me. So that's Don't Tell Claire, Adelaise, and Yurawan there. Onto the Duke of Cambridge, Rogue Millennium beating Random Harvest. This is my point exactly, where everyone was turning around the other day. And they're like, oh yeah, Moshtadaf, look how highly rated he is. Look how well he does it after a 50-day break and all this sort of thing. You expect him to come 110%. I totally appreciate that. But Moshtadaf was like 14-1 and went off, I don't know, maybe 12-1. Whereas here's a prime example of Grand Dame was 14-1 post decks, 9-1 after decks, went off 130 co-favourite. So the difference is, with the money and everyone's expectancy, you're expecting her to be ripe, as in ready to go today. And this was her first run of the season, but she wasn't anywhere near that. Like, I don't believe she suddenly become an awful horse overnight. So she ran no race whatsoever, and that's what I mean. This is where you're up against it. Like, you come to Royal Ascot and everyone treats it like it's a huge festival like Cheltenham, but trainers don't always treat it like that. Some will have this as their first run and as a starting point for the season, and that's clearly what happened with Grand Dame. So it's very difficult weighing out. You've got a Moshtadaf who people didn't expect to be bang on for the day, and a Grand Dame who you thought, looking at the just as purely on betting movement, thought would, and one does, one doesn't. So yeah, it's just difficult. I think Random Harvest, who finished second, has a nice pot in her. She will pick up a nice pot somewhere along the line, and it'll be a big price. She went off 33-1, and she finished only just beaten by Prosperous Voyage, half a length. And she's come here and she's ran again a monster run. She was sent off 22-1, and she was only beaten in the neck behind Rogue Millennium. It would not surprise me if you had a race which had Random Harvest, Prosperous Voyage, Jumbly, and Grand Dame in it again, and she was still the outsider, and she still will beat more of those home than she will finish behind. So I think at an each way price, she will be one to have on your radar further down the line. So onto the Prince of Wales stake, and obviously I've made my big point with Moshtadaf, just the fact that everyone, like every man and his dog, could see it now again, because obviously it's very simple post race, and that's just the fact that quite simply after something, I think it's something like 50 days, he's got a phenomenal record. Like, as in, he's not a bad horse. He's like, say, a 110 to 112 horse, but he's a 120 plus horse if he has his break, which is why they've already turned around and said they'll skip this and go to the Jumpmont. And it kind of makes sense now when you look at it this way, in the fact that everyone was saying, well, why are you running Hookham? It's such a waste to run him in a Group 2 on the weekend in the Hardwick, when you can run him in a Group 1 against 10 furlong horses here and you'd have every chance. Well, obviously they've won it with obviously the same colours, same connections, but with Moshtadaf. So maybe they were quietly confident, or they just thought, well, we've got a runner, so we don't want another runner in it. Either way, they got the result. This was mighty impressive. I know there was plenty of complaints afterwards about this, but there's nothing you can really complain about this. The only thing you complain about is the fact that we just didn't see it coming because, well, some people did. I'm not going to lie. I said there were people that did put this up, but I just think it was harder to see because of the fact that even if you'd go with the 50-day break thing, you just don't know that John Goslin's gotten right for my exact reason. Like, put it this way, another thing would be the fact that if I'd just seen Grand Dame get back 9-1 into 3-1 after that long break and run like that, I'm not then thinking, oh well, John Goslin's going to have them all primed. So it is what it is. But you take the winner out, and I think the rest have ran their race perfectly fine. Like, I know Luxembourg may have been softened up a bit by the American Raider, but I thought he ran his race. He beat Adyar half a length. That's probably about form. So, I mean, people were complaining about Adyar's run. I just think Adyar's not really improved from his younger years. He was phenomenal as a 3-year-old, and then 4-year-old he had a light campaign where he was okay. Obviously finished behind Bay Bridge in the Champion Stakes, but I just don't think he's really gone on from there. So obviously the yard doesn't really help. Royal Hunt Cup, flipping now, some deal for connections. If you're in those Chelsea thoroughbreds, Jimi Hendrix and Sonny Liston getting the 1-2 both spread out across the track. Just phenomenal performances. I mean, I heard a few talkings afterwards of Jimi Hendrix going for like Group 1s and stuff, and I don't see that myself. But God knows what he's going to get handicap wise because he's going to be definitely be going up in the marks. But yeah, it's a very impressive performance. Gregory, Queen's Vase. Now, me personally, like I was on two horses against Gregory in this, just because mainly because of his draw, and because of his inexperience. I was on Chesapeake because I thought he had the best form in the English, and Pekin Opera because I thought he looked to have a chance for the Irish. But Gregory, I mean, I think this was the turning point for Frankie Dettori's week because what he did was very, very bold and brash. And to me, it was like a rush of blood to the head. It was like he was just fed up, and it was either this horse was going to be good enough and it was all in or it was all out. Because it wasn't like a lot of runners came out of the thing, like you saw Ryan Mordaunt with Warm Heart later in the week. They came out from a wide draw and they faded across and blended in perfectly into that front spot. And he still could have took the front spot, but he could have done it a lot. Whereas he ragged Gregory out the gates like he stole it. He ran it. It just was like, poof, see you later. And he got across there, and he was so lucky that the horse had such a good temperament for a horse only having its third start that when he asked him to switch off and settle and slow the pace back down, he did. And obviously he managed to. It was a perfect ride from Frankie Dettori. Bar, I just think the start was do or die pretty much because it was so aggressive in the way he did it. But it paid off. He got to where he wanted to be. It was an awful draw. I feared the worst for him. I didn't think he'd win. Even drawn, I was watching him running bet, and he was like 1.6, and I thought if you're a backer or layer, you'd rather be a layer. Even though he was travelling well at the time, I thought to stay home. But he just outstayed the lot. I mean, he's between 2-1 and 4-1 for the Ledger, which I don't know if that's a good price currently. We'll have to see what comes out from it. There's a lot of horses in the Derby that we're yet to see come back out and play their hand, and it's still very early days to be that sort of price for the Ledger. But on his third start, is very little to knock. I mean, if he was in a normal gate, he would have flown the lot. And he would have won a lot easier. It was just the fact that when St George came to him, you thought St George would go past, and he just pulled out more again, which I think was a combination of Frankie getting a perfect breather in once he'd hit the front by the horse allowing him to settle. Because obviously he was lucky because if the horse only on his third start, if the horse had not, obviously with his inexperience, if he'd not settled back down, then Frankie was on for it because that horse was just going to keep pulling. But he just settled beautifully for him, and it was match made in heaven really. And I know that was a big one for a lot of the people on Ascot because you looked at it and there was a lot of the shouting and stuff. You could tell people had had a rough day. It was a bit like Vauban the day before. People had had the conkers on, I'd imagine. Chesapeake is still very well handicapped. I'd keep that one in your locker. I put Circle of Fire of Michael Stouts. He got a good record in a lot of these handicaps. Was out wide for plenty of the race. And just wasn't as good as the front few or didn't have the run of the front few. And St George of Andrew Baldwin's. Andrew Baldwin was another who was on the ice list, something like 29 runners with no winner. It's not so much that they didn't train well. It's just the fact that we just expect highly of them. Like obviously, Appleby was champion trainer last year. So you just come here expecting them to have a couple of wins. So for me, obviously Gregory's the obvious one, but St George, Chesapeake and Circle of Fire, all of those have gone straight in the notebook going forwards for future races, whether it be handicaps or group races. Windsor Castle, again, my point with the whole 2-year-old thing is Big Evs. Like, I'd say no one saw that coming, but they did apparently on track, because I spoke to a few lads afterwards, and apparently the word was going around the paddock, and it went from 66s throughout the day to 20s. But even despite it, like when Michael Appleby went across as a 2-year-old against Windsor Castle against the likes of Aidan O'Brien, you're expecting to see 50 to 1, and it goes across 20 to 1. So they definitely knew that what they had at home, but it was still mega impressive, and might even be underplayed next time if coming up against something of very similar sort of level. Like, I don't know, like a, what was that over? That was over 5 furlongs. I don't know, another good horse that done well at Royal Ascot and maybe finished first or second. And you might get a bigger price on that just because of unfashionable connections. So in summary for Wednesday, Queen Mary, I do think a lot of these will be hard to judge until you get a bit of form on them, maybe a couple of months down the line, because it wouldn't surprise me if Relief Rally should have won but doesn't, then Beautiful Diamond improves past her, etc. Of the handicappers, Don't Tell Claire, Adelazy and Year there. Get all of those into your notebook. Random Harvest is on for a big one at some point. Grand Dame, I'd also keep your eye on for when she does actually run a half decent race. Mostradath is going to be left for the Juddmonte now, given a break, as you'd expect, because the cat's out of the bag, that he clearly goes well fresh. Gregory's fairly obvious, but again, St George, Chesapeake and Circle of Fire, second, third and fourth. The form for these, the same as Newbury, the London Gold Cup that I'll get onto later in the week. The form of some of these races, like the Queen's Vase, like a Queen's Vase, if I remember rightly, I think this was won by Eldar Eldarov last year. Yeah, Eldar Eldarov, who obviously went on to then win the St Leger. So like, it will give you plenty of future targets. Big Evs may be underrated against a classy, fashionable trainer like Joseph O'Brien. So keep your eye out to see when he's entered next. So on to the Thursday of Royal Ascot. Thursday of Royal Ascot kicked off with the Norfolk. Not everyone, but so many people's banker of the week. Just going back quickly, obviously, to the issue with the time sectional boys against the thing. I don't know if people have read, but I've seen a Sadner's been moved from George Bowie over to Alice Haynes. Like, I don't know what the deal is with that. That's an aggressive move. But clearly there was a lot of rumour going around that he wasn't even going to run and that he'd had a few issues at home. So I don't know whether George Bowie was honest and said that to the connections, and they said, look, you're running him. He should be ready for this sort of thing. And then they decided to go to Alice Haynes. But I've got nothing against Alice Haynes, but for me, George Bowie is very, very good, and he's obviously a classic winning trainer. So it's an aggressive move to switch him. Anyway, going back to the Norfolk, Elite Status was beaten into third, 7-4 favourite. Disappointing for everyone, because obviously we'd all seen what he'd done at Sandown. There was a lot of talk that Sandown can flatter horses, but I don't think that was the case. I just think there was the horses, like, if Elite Status had bounced out the gate like Valiant Force did next door, and in that early stage of the race he'd been in that sort of position, I think he would have won the race. But he just wasn't. He was he bounced. He came out more like a 6 furlong horse or a 7 furlong horse, where he was allowed to find stride. He came in behind a couple of horses, then he was pushed along a bit, and then it was this whole, Clifford Lee saying he quickened twice again last time out. And I mean, he's done very well to get to where he did, but I just thought that Valiant Force in the early stages, it's almost like stealing cheap lengths in a 3 mile race. He made so much ground ahead that by the time you're trying to make up that ground, it's so difficult to do. And on a track as wide as Ascot, you've got no company to do it. Obviously, the horse, the Eyecatcher in behind, won't be an Eyecatcher next time, was Richard Fahey's Malk, who ran on in second at a huge price. Be interested to see what they do with that. But obviously, Elite Status, I'll see where they go with next. Valiant Force, you're not going to get 150 to 1 next time, but it'd be interesting if they put, say, a Valiant Force. This is what I'm saying about unfashionable connections. So it's not that Adrian Murray's not a fashionable connection, but if you had, say, Valiant Force against Carl Burke again next time out with Elite Status, then you might end up that Elite Status may be close to favourite still. So you might get a price if you fancy Valiant Force. There looked very little wrong with that performance to say that horse shouldn't have won. Dropped back to 5 furlongs, faster ground. It was very impressive. And obviously the fact that he was purchased before then, they must have known, they must have seen something beforehand. King George Stakes. So this was basically a lot of the London Gold Cup horses from Newbury. So if you'd put them in your tracker, the first 5, I've got them in my tracker. And if you're looking to see who they are, if you click on Desert Hero, it will show you. Off the top of my head, Desert Hero was sent off the 4-1 favourite, but ended up out the back, came around to the bend, ended up out the back, bounced back here and showed in true style how good he was. The winner that day was Bertinelli, who finished 1.5 lengths third. You'd imagine that if Bertinelli hadn't won that race and been put up the weight, then Bertinelli would have been very tough to beat here. Desert Hero did get the perfect ride, obviously, but at the same time, just scattering around, obviously, no one needs to know how good Desert Hero is because obviously he's played his hand. But for me personally, there's a lot of horses to take out this, all the way down to ninth. So in ninth, you had Burglar, who was short enough, but I think that was because Frankie was aboard. But I just thought the horse didn't stay on his first try at the trip. So whether they try the trip for a second time, potentially, because he travelled very well, just didn't find a lot in the final 2 furlongs, or if they step him back, he'd be interesting. Wonder Legend ran really well for a long way, just faded out of it towards the end of the race. That Tagabawa, who was 6-1, was coming here off having won at Kempton. Ran, I say ran well. Well, it did run well. It did run well, but obviously under the Appleby situation, I just think a lot of Charlie Appleby's just put them in your tracker, and when Charlie Appleby starts firing, these horses will start dropping left, right, centre. Perfuse looked like the winner about 2 furlongs out. Whether he went too soon or whether he needs dropping back in trip as well, but he travelled easily well enough to that he'll be winning big races or winning races off a marker 94 because he travelled. He looked good in the final couple of furlongs, but just coming to the final furlong, he just faded out of it. Bertinelli, obviously, I mentioned, and Valiant King, who obviously was going to win if it wasn't for Desert Hero. So for me, out of that, I'd be putting Valiant King in, Perfuse, Tagabawa, Wonder Legend, and Burglar. Obviously, with the Tagabawa, with the notion that Burglar potentially dropped back 2 furlongs and Perfuse maybe as well, but I wouldn't really put the trip down to Perfuse. I just think may have gone a little bit too soon. Ribblesdale Stake, obviously Alasifa was a massive disappointment for everyone. They're saying that she was flat and all the other different things. I think it was a combination of a multitude of a lot of things. I think there was a lot of pressure on her because of what she'd done previously going into the race. I think this came too soon. A lot of us put the faith in John Gosden, me included. I think this was a step too fast. It's very rare he got it wrong, and I think it was. It wasn't just the race; it was the tactics, it was the draw, everything about it was just a big no go. It drifted on the day, so it was almost like they were expecting it. Went out from about 4 to 7 to even money, pretty much. Didn't reflect that in the price, but was even money on the exchanges. And the difference was people will say, "Oh, the wide draw beat it," but Alasifa, however you say it, and Warm Heart were both drawn pretty much. I think they were stalled next to each other. And Ryan Moore, as I said, went out and faded across over towards the front. Jim Crowley went out and didn't fade across towards the front. He wasn't forward enough. He wanted to keep her on the outside and was worried about getting boxed in. She ended up doing the whole race 4 wide. She got brought down along the outside, and she was travelling at one stage, but then as soon as she got asked, she was just green. She was out on her own. She didn't know what was going on. And I think it's just a combination of many things. I don't think, like, you could stand there and say, "Oh, she's not a good horse," but I do think you can't write her off. Any horse can deserve just forget about a bad run. So I think that you drop her back to 12 furlongs, or you run her again at drop back to 10, or run her again at 12. I think she'll still be interesting going forward. But I think aspirations of her being ready for something like an Arc is a little bit of an afterthought at the moment. Warm Heart, clearly impressive, as always. Aidan O'Brien or John Gosden. John Gosden's flops, Aidan O'Brien's win. And yeah, there's little to knock about her former Blue Stocking. A lot of people saying Blue Stocking was obviously unlucky. Frankie got her in a bit of a pocket. Maybe she's the one to take out of the race, and that could be the case. But I think that Blue Stockings had a few chances to get past the likes of a Warm Heart, and she's not as gritty. Like, I do like Warm Heart. Like, if she takes on Save the Last Dance, it's going to be interesting to see who Ryan picks in the Irish Oaks. Because if it's fast ground again, Warm Heart just looks a proper trier. But obviously Save the Last Dance is a good horse too. But I think she likes a bit of cut from what we've seen. Gold Cup. The words fail me for this race. Like, you could have given me, I don't know how many. There was 12 runners. You could probably give me 8 darts, and I still wouldn't have picked Courage Man of Me. Firstly, because of the price. Like, if he was, say, a 16-1 plus, I could have easily made a case for it. Obviously, with all the things behind it. But to come here having beat Agagio, who's a national hunt horse, in a handicap on third start, to come here and win this on the fourth start is just absolutely madness. I don't know whether that means that this horse is going to be the next Stradivarius, or I don't know whether it means that I still haven't made head or tail of it. It's one of those where you just hope that Kyprios remains the machine, because then you don't have to worry about whether Courage Manami or whatever is going to be a good horse, because he'll just go around mopping up all these horses in the division. Subjectivist, great race for obviously considering the circumstances. Their aims to get him back for a one, like the be all and end all will be Goodwood, as you'd expect. Whether he'll be good enough there, I don't know. Coltrane is just a complete standard setter, and when there's not a phenomenal one in there, to be honest, I thought Coltrane should have won. He had every chance. He even headed him and went back the other way and looked like he was going to get back up, but the horse found more again. So, yeah, it's one of those meh. Onto the Britannia, Docklands, plenty of money for this horse, 14s into 6s the next day. Been put up, I think it was something like £10 or £14 before the race. Let's have a quick look. 80 to 94, yeah, so £14, and still drawn on the wrong side. Had a little bit of hard luck in running and still nearly got beat and managed to get up on the wrong side. So this horse must have had well over a stone still, which means that those that backed Docklands last time out off a mark of 94 at 6 to 1, you were literally laughing all the way to the bank. Because obviously the fact that still managed to get up on this occasion, despite all those negatives against it, means the horse is probably still going to, it's probably going to go up another £12. Horse that I took out of it was Urban Sprawl for the Britannia. Don't know what he'll end up getting or if he'll get any sort of punishment for that. But he ran a brilliant race at Goodwood when bolting up from the front. I backed him at Epsom. He was backed from 6 to 1 into 7 to 4 or 2 to 1 favourite for the handicap. Ran absolutely no race. Comes here, runs a monster race at 50 to 1 off the same mark. So he's dropped £1 off a mark of 90. So clearly anything around this sort of time that's Mark Johnston is going to be targeted at Goodwood. So when you get to Goodwood, handicaps, Urban Sprawl, as soon as you see him entered up, bang bang. Could end up getting 8s or 9s, something like that, early doors. You know what's going to happen. He's going to go from the front, and if he's off a mark of say 90, if the handicapper doesn't do him too much damage tomorrow in reassessment, if he can come third in a Britannia off a mark of 90, he's got scope to be winning a Goodwood handicap off a mark of 90, knowing that if he gets a good draw, he's going to bounce out and attempt to make all, so he'll avoid all trouble, and that is going to be his prime aim. So the other one that I want to focus on is the Hampton Court. This is the other big handicap that I like that features in the other side with the King George handicap. And the reason the Hampton Court's important is because the form overlaps. The horses that finished behind Bertinelli on the day was Exoplanet and Bold Act. And I think Exoplanet and Bold, I think of this race, there's many horses to take out. I think Waipiro, obviously brilliant, dropping back from the Derby, back into this sort of company and wins well. But I think he was gifted the race. Not that he didn't have the talent, but he was gifted the race by Oviedo. Callum Rodriguez, when well beaten, was just riding his horse too hard and ended up pulling his horse. Between him and the horse, they veered left and they knocked out half the track, and it just gave the absolute golden highway for Tom Marquand, after obviously already had him in it earlier with Desert Hero, to just go straight down the middle, whereas everyone else got pushed into the car park and went round. Yeah, Exoplanet was beaten 2 1/4 lengths into second, but I mean that really was a gift from above for Waipiro, because it hampered all the second, third, and fourth. So for me, the second, third, and fourth are the ones to take out of this. So this is what I'm saying. This is my point: is the fact that I get it. Everyone's had a rubbish week last week, but there's a lot of takes that you can put in this, and I would be getting these 3 in your handicap. Second and third obviously came from the London Gold Cup at Newbury. They're clearly well handicapped, and I think there would have been it would have been very close between those two and Waipiro of who would have won this race had Oviedo, because I don't think Waipiro would have got a run. I don't think he would have found the gap if Oviedo hadn't wiped the other two out. So it was like a double win. Not only did he get the gap, he also hampered the other two that were going forward. Exoplanet is off 100 here and Bold Act's off 107. I think both those have got massive scope still off those marks. Bold Act, obviously, especially in the fact that we know what Charlie Appleby's form's been. And also, Bold Act was one of the first beaten. He was getting pushed along out the back, winding round, yet he was up there in the bandwagon at the end of the race in the final furlong, pushing along with Exoplanet, having had to go around the car park. So they're strongly in my handicaps, Exoplanet and Bold Act. And obviously the fourth place was the Torito, the 4 to 1 joint favourite. Torito's obviously been turned out fairly quickly after Epsom. I don't think he ran flat in any sort of way possible. I just think I think if he had not so much a better ride, but a bit more luck in running, then again, he's another that he had to go close here. And if his mark doesn't get hit too hard off a mark of 105, and he's beaten 2 3/4 lengths, so he shouldn't do, I just think he had to do so much. Like, as in, again, he raced wide. He was like 3 wide throughout the race. He ended up switched out again, and he ended up getting knocked out to the side. He ended up hanging. He didn't get a clear run. He was stuck in pocket. He had all sorts of things go against him. And I just think if he's turned out in the next few weeks, like once you know that it's a target for whatever it is, the same for all of these horses, Exoplanet, Boldak, Torito. I'm not talking about backing them anti-post like now, as in for a race in 2 or 3 weeks, but with the flat, you often hear that the horse is getting aimed at, say, I don't know, the John Smith's Cup or whatever in 3 weeks' time. So if you wait until the Monday or Tuesday, the decks will come out on the Tuesday, but the prices won't be like massively dramatic. They don't really change till 2 days before. So if you get those decks straight away and you're looking at horses like Exoplanet, Boldak, stuff like that, and they're say 8 to 1, 12 to 1 or whatever, some of them might be really competitive. So obviously you have to take an assessment on every race. But at the same time, these are the sort of horses you want on your shortlist. And then finally, I'm not even going to touch that Buckingham Palace Witch Hunter. The whole race collapsed, and obviously Jamie Spencer special. So Norfolk, in summary, don't give up on elite status. It's just the fact that I think he wants a race where he doesn't have to be so quick out the stalls, so step up in trip potentially. It's also worth noting Carl Burke was another one on the cold list. He had a lot of fancied runners and he's had a phenomenal start to the season, but it was almost like he played a bit like Gordon Elliott with Willie Mullins. It was like he played his cards a little bit too early because some of his horses you expected to fire here. Not that they weren't up to scratch, they just weren't phenomenal. And if I just click on Carl Burke quickly, he's running at 52% run to form. Whereas I bet you if you looked at some of his runners a few weeks ago, he might have been at 70-80% because some of us were running out of their skin. The King George Stakes, in summary, you want to be putting Valiant King, Perfuse, Tagabawa, and Wonder Legend and Burglar in the tracker. You'll have more in the tracker than you will on the course. It'd be interesting to see if Warm Heart races Blue Stocking again, because a lot of people think that Blue Stocking could turn her over, but I think Warm Heart's just game in the finish. Gold Cup, I've got no issue. I don't even want to think about that right now. Urban Sprawl for Goodwood handicaps. I know everyone's thinking Goodwood's ages away, but it'll fly round. Goodwood's at the start of August, so it's only 5 weeks away. Hampton Court, quite simply. Waipiro winner, fair enough, but the horses that I want out of here, Exoplanet, Boldak and Torito, the three in behind, second, third and fourth. Obviously see how their marks get affected tomorrow when the handicapper comes out. I realise it's a long video, but obviously I have broken it down to sections, so obviously hopefully people can just watch a bit as and when they want to, or none at all. So Royal Ascot Friday, for anyone dipping in. Again, Albany, as I mentioned, 17 runners, and there was about 5 or 6, I think there was 6 that were less than 10 to 1. And you were looking at horses that had all had 1 or 2 runs. Me personally, the biggest take I got out of this was you should be really having your smallest bets in these races, even smaller than handicaps. I saw so many good judges. I watched it myself. I looked at the sectionals, and Navassa Island looked set to turn the form of Porta Fortuna. And if they'd had another, even a couple of metres on the race, then Navassa Island would have got up on that day. But Porta Fortuna was just clearly a lot more streetwise, ready. I just think it's so underplayed how wide the field goes in these 2-year-old races. So where it's a straight track, I think so many of them get so lost at sea that once you get out into the middle of the track, they just don't know where they are. And unless you're streetwise, and Porta Fortuna was just the most forward, I think the horse to take out of it is second and third. Matrika, at one stage I thought was going to win, travelled all over the winner, but the winner was very good on the day. And obviously Aidan O'Brien, mares and fillies, but also Soprano. Soprano was drawn on the wrong side and only beaten 2 lengths, and they're training her to be a 1,000 guineas horse, and I can see that. I'm not telling you should put it on, but at the same time I'm not telling you shouldn't. She's 25 to 1. If you get a free £5 with Sky Bet, I've seen worse bets than that. But at the same time, I think there'll be plenty of horses. With all the 2-year-old races, give them all another run after Royal Ascot, see where you end up with them. Commonwealth Cup. So I've got a theory about this, one that most people will disagree with. The first thing is Shaquille could be the next monster. No dispute of that. And I'm a bit disappointed in myself because if I hadn't backed Noble Style Antipost, I would have put Shaquille up and backed it myself as a second selection. But because I backed Noble Style so early in the season, I was stuck with 2 selections already. I didn't want to end up investing too much money myself. I was impressed with what he did against Noble Style the time before, and I didn't think it was going to be a fluke. At the same time, I thought this would be too much. But I thought this would be too much for one reason, pure and simple, was the fact that I thought the horse would get out the stalls, blast off, and would end up being an absolute sitting duck. And I've got two ways of looking at this. Theory one is the fact that we would have seen a Lady Aurelia like performance from Shaquille if he'd actually made the break. So he'd have blasted out. Something like Little Big Bear would have come up to him and he would have gone away again and he would have won so impressively. And obviously, one by 1 3/4 lengths, 1 1/4 lengths, so just over a length, would have been maybe 4 or 5 lengths impressively. However, theory two, which is the one I actually am quite not strong on, but I do think is more likely in my opinion, is a series of unfortunate events actually helped him and hindered others. This is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, and I totally appreciate that, but this is my own personal view. Shaquille ended up missing the break, therefore he could not blast out to obviously do all this energy. Visually, obviously, that is going to hamper any horse, and I watched it again today a couple of times, and he did lose. He's losing like probably, well, he's losing a couple of lengths, but it's not just the lengths; it's the momentum of the start of a sprint finish. But obviously, also it depends on the speed that they go in that 6 furlongs. But 6 furlongs are not going to hang around regardless. But my point is, so then obviously Murphy did not panic. He waited. The problem that Murphy then had was the horse then went woof because it was used to going as fast as possible for as long as possible, but went straight into the back of a wall of horses because the horse was travelling too fast and then got stuck there. It wasn't the horse was like pulling like a train. It was just stuck. Could not go anywhere. And it was like, great, where am I going to go? And then even with about a furlong and a half out, he's still stuck behind 3 horses. And then he finally gets his gap and he pulls out and he goes around and he wins going away. So impressive. I don't dispute that. However, my theory, and this may be a complete delusional theory, is that I think if Shaquille hadn't had that double hinder, I think by the fact that he was forced to wait in that pocket and obviously missed the break, it's actually caused him to not use that extra energy. He may well just be the next big monster. But the other side of the things is, what if it was the fact that because of those, if he'd blasted out from his stall, Little Big Bear, this is how I thought the race was going to go originally. Little Big Bear gets the perfect toe in behind. Little Big Bear just follows him for as long as possible, and then Little Big Bear makes his challenge. Because he didn't blast out, Little Big Bear's ended up making a challenge on swing along about 2 furlongs out, and he's made his challenge too soon and he's idled when he'd hit the front and he's not gone away. One, obviously that's not great to see from a sprinter anyway, obviously from Little Big Bear, but at the same time he did at Haydock, once he got to the front, he didn't really do a lot. So my view was the fact that if Shaquille had gone out in front, it would have given Little Big Bear the perfect toe and we would have seen if Little Big Bear was good enough. So I think obviously that hindered Little Big Bear, not maybe obviously he wouldn't have beaten Shaquille, but from running his optimum race. Obviously, a lot of people are saying you are talking absolute rubbish, and that may be true. But they're both going to the July Cup, and me personally, if it's 5-2 Shaquille currently and it's 5-1 Little Big Bear, I think I'd rather. Obviously, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. I'd rather obviously roll the dice again at the bigger price. But just going on to obviously, you've got to also think of. I'm not going to stand here and give you a load of horses, but there's plenty of other horses on the sidelines that we haven't seen here. Like we're looking at this, and obviously the Commonwealth. We know the 6 furlong division was very weak on the Saturday. The 6 furlong Commonwealth, we've just seen 9-1 winner, and the 5 furlong was won by Bradsell. So I think the sprint divisions are wide open. So I'd be looking outside of the box if I were you. On to the Duke of Edinburgh, HMS President. That would have been one of my good times for the winner week. 20-1, finished second, but he didn't. To hear a lot of people, I'm going to try and keep this short. To hear a lot of people have negative on Tahira's performance. I thought she was brilliant because those sort of races are the sort of races that get good horses beat. They're an absolute mess. Everyone's all over the shop, and then something comes and manages to get them beat. I thought she did everything that was asked of her. If you set her a scorching pace in a big field, like if she was running in a 1,000 guineas again with 20 horses, a good lead and stuff, and she gets somewhere she can hide in behind and then pull out and go past. I think she's going past plenty of horses, and I don't want to say it just yet, but she does remind me quite a lot of like the Tanawa, the way she runs and that she lengthens. It would just be interesting to see one if they step her back and trip, but I think Dermot Weld's going to give her a break, and I think he's going to go down a similar route to Tanawa and end up in something like the Diana over in France in the soft ground, and you just see a better and better horse. Sandringham, not going to touch. King of Steel, very impressive. Really like this horse. To do that, obviously didn't bounce. I think by the time the race came, most people thought he wasn't going to bounce. I think the word was going around that he was ready for this. The hardest thing was trying to look for something to take him on. He didn't do anything that we didn't expect him to do, and the rest of the field didn't improve from the Derby, like horse like Arrest and stuff. Why he was running after his no show on the Saturday, I don't know. But yeah, King of Steel horse, he's going to be tough to beat. Anywhere August Rodin's not, I'd imagine he's going to be very, very difficult to beat on whatever ground. He just looks a monster. So in summary, Albany Stakes, Matrika and Soprano will be the horse I take out of it. The Commonwealth Cup, I'm happy to give Little Big Bear another chance. Not saying Jekyll's not the best next big thing, but sprinters all beat each other all the time, and it's all about price. Tahira, wait for the soft ground and a bigger, faster pace. King of Steel is going to take the beating wherever he goes. So finally, if you've persevered all the way, we are on Royal Ascot Saturday. And this will be short because it was just a mad day. Chesham, again, this summarised my whole 2-year-old theory, the fact that they should be a smallest bet. It's Pearls and Rubies, another one. This is what Aidan O'Brien said as well. He won the trainers title this week with 4 winners. And when everyone looks at it, you think, oh, Aidan O'Brien was phenomenal this week. And he was. But as he said himself, too many seconds. Like horses like Pearls and Rubies, Little Big Bear, like these sort of horses are normally the ones that get out. And the punters love it, the jollies go in, everyone's having the best time, and Royal Ascot's the most special place on the planet. It doesn't mean that Pearls and Rubies won't beat Schneller next time. Doesn't mean Pearls and Rubies isn't a bad horse. The horse that I liked out of it is Golden Mind, because the horse in front, Pearls and Rubies, obviously was getting the weight. Golden Mind I didn't go with just because I knew that the fillies had such a good record in this, getting the weight. Golden Mind was obviously the half brother to Perfect Power. Runs nothing like it, but stays on like a train. And the fact that he's learning each time, I said his race would be won and lost in the first 50% of the race, just because of the fact that his tendency, not that he doesn't miss it, it's just the fact that he has to often be, he doesn't travel like some of the other better horses. He's still learning, but he finds so much off the bridle. However, on this day, he was fine, and he was almost unlucky in the final stages because he was staying on so hard at the line. And if he was stepped up to a mile, or if he'd got going sooner, then he would have probably got the job done. So Golden Mind out of that race. Jersey Stakes, I don't even want to talk about that race. 7 furlongs, when you're going to see more 7 furlong horses. I don't rate any of those really. The QE2, Cardem. So this is my point. Like just have a think about the outside of the bigger picture. The 6 furlong Newmarket July Cup. There are horses that have not come to Ascot, the likes of Azure Blue, and other horses like that, and they're 10-1 for the Newmarket July Cup. They've skipped Ascot. They're not come here, and they've got form with the likes of Highfield Princess. So I don't want to point out the obvious to everyone and obviously put things on a plate, but you just got to be thinking outside the box. Like, this is the 6 furlong race. So the 6 furlong competition is, at the moment, you're looking at Little Big Bear and Shaquille were the 2 out of the other race, with Swing Along, who was about 2 lengths behind. And then of this competition, you've got Cardem, Sacred and Highfield Princess. That's the standard they're setting in the Newmarket July Cup. Cardem won a Group 1 for his 9th attempt. So will he win another one? Who knows? You're completely guessing. Sacred was so unlucky in the fact that it's just one of those horses that just can't, like, it just looked like this was finally his time. Or is it a her time? I think it's a her time, sorry. And let me just find that out. I don't want to give you duff. Yeah, she. But it wasn't. And Highfield Princess, she ran brilliantly for a horse that had raced 3 days earlier. The problem with Highfield Princess was on the earlier in the week over 5 furlongs, she looked like she was staying on the finish to go past Bradsell. And at this point in the 6 furlongs, I thought she ran a carbon copy of last year, where she was up there in the van at the final and she was going to win, and then she's outstayed by other horses. I mean, Sacred hit the front, and I thought that was it. And then Cardem come through under a standard Spencer ride. Spencer and Haley Turner both so good on the Ascot straight track. They just wait and they let everyone play their cards. And I rewatched him again today. He's just there hanging out the back, waiting for everyone to play their cards, and swept through. But I don't think that form's worth the paper it's wrote on. So going forward, I'll be looking to take them on. Hardwick Stakes, Pile Driver. Again, this go back to the Mostadaf situation. I see people afterwards, they're like, oh yeah, but it's obvious, like best form in the race. But yeah, okay, it's so hard for, I'm not saying for people to understand, but if you can't see the bigger picture here to why people couldn't back Pile Driver. You had the trainer in the morning saying, if this horse wins, I'll be bullish. But today's not the day. He's running at like 70% today. But I need to get a run into him to knock the keenness out of him, to get him race fit, ready for the Ascot King George next month back here. That's his aim. So the fact that he won was just testament to how good the horse was. But he didn't have to do so many things wrong in the race. Free Wind ran no race whatsoever, but she still didn't get beaten far. And obviously beating West Wind Blows and changing the guard. Like if you look at the difference in numbers, like West Wind Blows is rated 111. I think Padra is about 125. Yeah, 124. So yeah, £13 clear. But at the end of the day, you were going, well, me personally and quite a lot of people were going with Free Wind because she was the up and coming horse. She'd been trained for the race, she'd won races, she'd come in there unbeaten, all of that sort of thing, and she was race fit. Like if you'd known Pile Driver was going to run his race, then that's fine. But with the trainer saying those things in the morning as well, they don't give you confidence. He's as honest as they come. You can't blame him as well. It's brilliant to hear from him. The Wokingham, stick a pin in them. Obviously, they'll all beat each other throughout the season. I could go through and name some eye catchers, but then they could get blocked in next time, and then they're an eye catcher again. Onto the Golden Gate, and I think you can take many out of this. So Burdett Road, I didn't see coming. Be interested to see what weight gets for the Michael Bell horse. Lion of War ran a very, very good race. Stall 17, which most people say, oh yeah, but that's stall 17, stall 16 for him and Local Dynasty. But they're actually, the high draws are favoured in this race. So they actually ran what you'd expect to. And yeah, Lion of War and Local Dynasty, put both of them in your trackers. Lion of War I thought was going to get up and was the horse that many had touted for this. Local Dynasty, Charlie Appleby again. I don't know whether they're not finishing their races or maybe they are just all at that level, but get them in your tracker. Zuryab, way too keen. Found plenty of trouble out wide, all sorts of things. Get him in the tracker. And you know what I'm going to say? Mark Johnson horse that completely bombed out when dropped back in trip, beaten 28.5 lengths on Frankie's last ride at Royal Ascot, drifted from 7-2 all the way out to 6-1. What am I going to say to do? Put him in your tracker because roll on Glorious Goodwood. When the handicaps come out and you see Knockbrex entered over 10 furlongs off either this mark or a lower mark due to this very average performance, long and behold, Glorious Goodwood is coming. So yes, and then I'm not going to talk about the Queen Alexandra Stakes. I will talk about it, sorry, briefly. What I will talk about is I think Ryan Moore could have been on the Grand Vizier in second or Dawn Rising in first, and either way he wins the race. He is unreal, as everyone knows, but he's won that race. Dawn Rising was getting pushed along a long way out, and Grand Vizier, Richard Kingscott once they came there like he was on Frankel riding up on the thing. Then when he pushed him along, Ryan Moore just had more, and it was like ding dong. Grand Vizier headed, Dawn Rising fought back, and I think whichever jockey, it's not me being disrespectful to other jockeys, it's the fact of what he brings to the table. If he was on either of those two horses, he wins that race. He is that good. And that was one for the punters, which was good. Run for Oscar. I mean, yeah, that wasn't a nice watch for anyone who was anyone who was on that. Let's just say he looks well handicapped still, and I'm sure Charles Burns would have had a few words, and he'll be brought out further down the line and have many more to take. So, quick summary of Saturday. What I've took out of it: Golden Mind for the Chesham or the Chesham, either over 7 furlongs or stepped up to a mile going forward. Definitely wants one. He just needs that early stage. Once he gets going, I think you won't get the same prices, but I think he'll be winning races soon. Jersey, I don't care. QE2, look elsewhere in the 6 furlong sprint division currently. Hardwick, Pile Driver, come on for that run beautifully for his race next month, the King George. But obviously, Free Wind, I wouldn't give up on her. She'll bounce back. That was not her true running. Whether she's at this level, we don't know, but she will bounce back. The Golden Gates, take a few out of it. Lion of War, Local Dynasty, put both of those two in the tracker. Zuryab as well, first time in a handicap debut. The fact that he was 4-1 at one point and drifted to 8s, I'd say he's definitely worth another look. And Knockbrex, obviously 7-2 all the way out to 6-1 on Frankie's last ride, so they knew that today wasn't the day. But it's a bit of a shame really because there's quite a lot of horses this week. Get him in the handicap ready for Goodwood. So that's it. That's all of the Royal Ascot summary. Just going obviously onto the handicap, it was quite disappointing at times with the fact that it clearly seemed whether it was connections or owners or trainers, but certain people knew quite a lot more than the average punter last week. Certain people knew that horses were going to be 110%. Certain people knew horses were going to run no race, like a horse like, say, the likes of a Sakir, that obviously, very honest of Roger Varian's come out today and say that there's an issue, which he actually stated almost post-race on the Nick Luck thing on the Sunday, saying, oh yeah, we already know what the problem was. Obviously, a Sadner didn't run anywhere near his level. And I think there's a lot of, but you look on the Betfair Exchange, and if you sat down in a classroom with someone and you brought them all up on a projector and looked at the Betfair Exchange throughout the day for every individual race, I think you like, oh, not obviously we all as punters now look at it and think, oh, what a fluke, oh, what a fluke, oh, that's a joke, oh, that's a joke, oh, why's that favourite got beaten? But I think if you sat down there and you analysed all of that now, there's probably quite a bit more than we realised at the time, where there was quite a few people that knew what was happening, whereas we just as punters weren't obviously privy to that information. Royal Ascot, as always, brilliant fun, always a learning lesson as always, and all I can say for myself is, yeah, it wasn't a positive week. I haven't worked out the maths. Obviously, I would have probably lost, if you were putting points on it, 20, 25 points worth of stakes because of just my selections throughout the week. They weren't great, and it's just the fact it was the feature of the week. But at the same time, you could stand there and be like, oh, that means I can't pick any winners ever again. Or you can just try and look for all the positives out of it, try and find where those winners are coming from, and also learn from it. For me, 2-year-olds, that's the biggest take I've took out of this, is that come the end of the week you were literally just betting on a dartboard if you were having big bets in the 2-year-old races. So that was Royal Ascot done and dusted. Obviously the week coming is the Irish Derby. Potentially have a YouTube up. If I do, it'll either be Friday night or Saturday morning. Wait to see what the entries are like. Obviously August Rodin in the Derby itself will take all the beating. But regards the rest of the race, we'll have to wait and see. So I hope you enjoyed Royal Ascot. Any likes are much appreciated, and any comments if you've enjoyed if you've enjoyed any of the content last week, whether it helped or hindered, won or lost you, any positive or negative criticism. All I'm doing is looking to improve this service and just help people out if I can here and along the way. So hope you all have a good week, and that's it from me.